Hi there, Ron Shera here for Star Bank. If you're putting your money into mega banks down the street, who knows where that money's being used? It's time to make the switch. Bank locally. Keep your money local with a community bank that actually cares about you, your family, your business, and your goals. Let me give you some advice from personal experience. Check out the bank we use at Minnesota Bound. Try Minnesota's own Star Bank. You can find them online at starbank.net. When you call Star Bank, you actually hear a real living person answering the phone. Star Bank has 10 convenient locations around Minnesota to serve you and all the mobile banking products that you need to manage your money. From Maple Lake to Elbow Lake, Eagle Bend to Eden Prairie. Check out all that Star Bank has to offer at starbank.net.
Well, hello, everybody. Bill Sherck, the man about the woods, down in the world headquarters of the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. Just came in not long ago from the tent out back. And I were doing a little counting. We think since the stay-at-home order has been in place that we are at like 29 days now outside under the stars, which has been a lot of fun for us. The boys are on their fourth camp they've set up out behind the house. We've got a few acres with the prairie, so we've got some room to spread out, and we've experienced all sorts of things over the last few weeks. We've seen the SpaceX satellites all come zipping over. We've heard more coyotes than you can count. Even our resident pheasants, you actually hear them cackle in the middle of the night a little bit, which has been really, really fun for us. The problem is we're burning so much darn firewood in the fire pits that I'm going to have to get out and do some cutting and restocking. But, you know, being outside right now has been very big for our family. It's been really therapeutic. And that got me thinking about the perfect guest for today. I thought, you know what? Scott Oeth is absolutely the guy we should be talking to. Scott is the proprietor, kind of the mind behind something here in Minnesota, the Bull Moose Patrol, which is all about getting outside. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here.
Have you been stuck indoors, or have you been trying to get out and about?
Well, both. So trying to get out and about, doing a lot of work in my home office with, 3 kids at home and dog barking at every jogger and mailman and Amazon delivery. And so been having that fun. But, a lot of the things that you just said, trying to get out a lot. And I think we're probably wired the same way. I just need it and would go into a funk and depression if I didn't have some fresh air and green and wood smoke in my life. And so I've been trying to, work in little adventures and opportunities as much as possible.
Yeah, a little bit of background for people. You are a guy who is spending a good chunk of your life outdoors in wild places. And describe the Bull Moose Patrol. What is this all about?
Yeah. Bull Moose Patrol. So I've always been an outdoors guy, always loved it. Grew up with a dad who liked the outdoors, was a passionate canoeist, had uncles who'd grown up on a farm and were, hunters and trappers and that type of thing. And very happily, I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and right out my back door, the University of Wisconsin has an arboretum that was designed in part by Aldo Leopold, famous conservationist, and that was my backyard growing up. And that's, I think that's why just a lot of this is just a part of me. So I've always been interested in that stuff. I had kind of a long detour in sports, which was wonderful in its own way, and but have really dove back into the outdoors as my sports time was kind of fading out, and had always been involved in scouts. I had a wonderful Boy Scout experience growing up. got involved as an adult leader, largely as a volunteer at the council and national level, because I didn't have any boys of scouting age of my own for a long time.
Yeah.
And so that was wonderful and very rewarding, and would take friends out and do different things, lead trips here and there, and take some bigger expedition type trips myself. So always been a part of my life. But about 6 or 7 years ago, my wife and I started a company, Bull Moose Patrol, with the idea of making it a bit more formal, professionalizing it. I had been taking, as I was searching for the next thing to kind of scratch my itch and keep it fun and challenging for myself, I'd started taking a number of pro-level guiding certifications, wilderness first responder and wilderness survival instructor training from Air Force SEER instructors, and became a registered Maine guide. And so a number of those pro type things, and it just felt like the logical next step is to take a lot of what I love to do, because I found not only do I like having these experiences, which I do, and I like doing a lot of things solo, but it's really fun, it's really rewarding for me to help people that wouldn't otherwise do these things, put it together, plan the event, help them prepare, take them out, show them something new, make sure that they have a really great time. I kind of like to say I specialize in fun. I like the hard techniques and skills of the outdoor living, but I really like to create a fun, cool experience for people and make sure they're doing it in a safe fashion. There's no need to be cold and wet and mosquito bitten or, at risk of drowning or anything like that. So we started Bull Moose Patrol, and it was kind of a dual purpose. We blog, we write about places to go in the area. We write about how to do it, do a lot of speaking, do a lot of classes, and then also guiding the trips in the field.
So much of your story, yes, parallels mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather, he had a camp up in a logging town in Quebec called Fort Collonge or Collonge. And Dad spent a lot of time growing up there in the bush, right? With a flat bottom boat where they would get stuck across the Ottawa River and had to fend for themselves. My home here is full of old relics from the logging camps that they pillaged and so I had that camping in me. Again, like you, I was in Scouts in a troop that I really appreciated, where we got clothes dirty and we learned adventure and learned the right way. And that stuff sticks with you, right? It gets ingrained in you. You have to be outside. You have to know what it feels like to split a piece of cedar for a fire and cook over flame and have the skills to be able to manage risk. We're not talking about Coleman tents and State Park Site 274, right? We're talking about going to wild places where things are still pretty virgin.
Yep.
And that's special.
Yep. Absolutely.
I will say, as a scout, I did pass my very first test early on in my career, and I don't consider anyone an apt outdoors person unless they've done this, and that is to throw a can of Dinty Moore beef stew into a fire. What happens? That was on one of my very first trips outdoors. It was actually a winter trip, and so the story ends. Yes, the can eventually exploded, and there were about 6 of us standing around, and these little chunks of hot potato and carrot and beef kind of went all 360 degrees. And as soon as they touched any of the tent fabric or the mosquito netting, right?
Yep.
Turned, I think it was kind of city hall sort of shelter things, and the Swiss cheese ruined the Eureka Timberline tent way back in the day. And
it's
those are all good memories.
They're almost scout proof. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Did you learn to at least yell fire in the hole when you throw the Dinty Moore in the fire?
My best buddy from back in the day always says, "You threw the can in the fire, didn't you?" And I would say, "No, I didn't. I had no idea." But
Yeah.
all chapters, and that was a long, long, long time ago. But um, right now, with the way the world is, our governor here in Minnesota, Governor Walz, has repeatedly pronounced that Minnesotans should be outdoors. And and for you being a professional, like, why is it so important to people? What's the
Well, I
point,
think,
especially for
yeah.
somebody who's not used to sleeping out under the stars?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just think there's so many elements to that. I found it very interesting. I flag a lot of these articles as I see them come up online and put them in a folder for reference for later. But I think it's just something, like you and I just feel. It's just part of us, and we always have. And a lot of outdoors people feel that way. But, it's interesting. There's a lot of academic research coming up talking about nature deficit disorder and forest bathing, and even seeing green on your computer screen, how that can affect your psychology and your mood.
Yeah.
And we're mammals. We lived off the land in a very primitive way for a whole lot longer than we live this modern existence. Kind of in modern buildings and with digital technology, and we've rapidly advanced from more rustic era into the industrial age and technology age, and from push button to touch screen, and it's easy to be pretty distanced and pretty pulled away from the natural world. But I don't know. I feel like I don't even need to cite research. I just know when I go outside, I feel better. If I go for a hike in the forest and I hear the birds sing and I feel the fresh air and I see the trees, there's just something very simple about it. It's refreshing. And boy, if I put my canoe on a quiet lake and paddle across that calm water, and maybe hear
Yes.
a loon sing or see a heron take off, it's just fantastic. And there again, like nature deficit disorder is getting a lot of talk. There's a well-known book that came out about that several years ago, and I think that's wonderful. That's part of the discussion. And you're hearing things like, your average prisoner in the U.S. is getting more time outside than your average American school child, and that's a little disturbing.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of coming out of like Silicon Valley. Everyone's talking about meditation, how important that is. And I think, well, that's interesting. And I've worked in yoga into my workout routines as a middle-aged guy. That's helpful, and it is nice. I feel good. But I think, the ultimate meditation for me is paddling that canoe on a quiet waterway. It's going for a nice hike in the woods. It's sitting outside my backyard, staring at a fire. That kind of primal connection, and
Yeah.
the basic elements. And for me, that's as good as any sort of manufactured meditative experience.
One of the things the boys and I have been doing, they're 9 and 11. Of course, they've been in sleeping bags, since they were 3, 4 years old. But we love to trout fish, and here in Minnesota right now, that is an incredible way to get outdoors. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to interact with anyone. Get in the vehicle at home, have the gear packed, drive down, follow the state maps to your favorite trout stream. There's public access, and then you can just hike into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And the boys have been commenting about how special it is to be there. Right? Sometimes they get they don't have a lot of patience when they're trout fishing, especially with fly rod. But all that has gone away. They just say, we want to stay. Are we in a hurry to leave this place? And I feel like that is having a positive impact.
Yeah.
And that's the importance, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I just see so many angles to it, so many sides. One of the things I realize, I feel like life is just moving faster and faster all the time. And even though for, my day job, I've been walking downstairs, sitting in my home office, and it feels like, boom, wow, it's end of day already. This is crazy how quickly time's just screaming by here. When I'm outside, time moves a lot slower. It's almost like an alternate time warp. It's amazing how things slow down. And if you're standing on the bank of a creek trying to get trout, I don't know, in hour feels like 4 hours in a
It
normal
does.
busy
Yes.
day, doesn't it? It
Yes.
just slows down. We have so many digital bombardments that come in and are robbing our attention and demanding our attention constantly. It fills every second, and to get outside where you can just have that pause and that refreshing break, it's amazing. A lot of my friends who are wilderness enthusiasts, especially wilderness trippers who love expedition canoe trips or long backpacking trips or things like that, they'll say, well, you really need 10 days or whatever, and I'm like, that's great. I get that. I love the big trip and the long trip, but I'll take an hour over nothing, and even a weekend getaway for me feels fantastic. It's remarkable to unplug, and so that sense of time passing. And something else I've been thinking about a lot is one of the things I like about wilderness camping, and then maybe even you go a step further and start to think about traditional woodcraft or primitive skills. It's such a reset in terms of what you really need in your daily life. And we've got a time going on now where a lot of people are concerned about their jobs and their incomes, and I get that. There's a lot of reality there and a lot of fear, but I really enjoy going out and just realizing, man, I don't need much. I don't need much to live, to take care of myself, and I don't need much to be happy. And I think that's important. There's a lot of affluenza and just a buildup of lifestyle and feeling like we need a certain amount of consumer goods, kind of that, hedonic treadmill where you keep working your way up in consumer goods. And we don't need all that. We don't need all that to be happy.
And I think, the bushcraft or the traditional skills are becoming cool again, right? Like there's value. Talk a little bit more about what that means, what those skills are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always been interested in that side of the outdoors. I like history. That's sort of another angle of this for me, or overlay, is I love history, and I don't think I know this is not the way it is for everyone. A lot of people, they like nature because they like nature or being outside. I love it because of that, but I also I think I feel a tie to it because I really enjoy and am intrigued by history, and that's how closer to how people lived in the past. If you're thinking about the voyageurs or the mountain men, or even just farmers in Minnesota a couple generations ago. And so a lot of the traditional skills where you're working and living more closely with the land, in kind of the golden era of outdoor recreation, you'd see photos, when people went camping, maybe they're cooking over a fire, they're cooking fish they freshly caught, they're using gear that's made out of wood and leather and canvas, kind of these natural materials that blended in with the land. And they're hunting and fishing typically, they're kind of part of that cycle of nature. And often you read a lot of the works from back in that era. They had a higher understanding of the resources, the plants, the trees, what they could do or not do.
Yes.
And it's all interesting. And then I think it's kind of interesting evolution. We got somewhere there in the late 60s or the 70s, and there was a big boom in outdoor recreation, but it was a modern boom. It was kind of a nylon and technology boom. And in many ways, I think it was great. It got a lot of people, like there was a huge burst in wilderness backpacking in the early 70s, which had people having incredible experiences, but it led down a path of modern gear and gear evolution and a lot of great gear. And I like gear that helps keep you safe and warm and dry. That's important. But it just seems, I think there's a sense that where outdoor recreation has gone is very gear heavy and very gear selection and gear dependent. And I'm guilty. I love gear, and I could sit there and obsess about it all the time. But there's kind of a rebirth and interest in the older way of doing things and focusing more on the skills and the place and understanding how to live with the land and in harmony with it, and as opposed to just sort of what's your shopping list at the outdoor store and how you can, in the nature's sort of the backdrop.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's with the boys and with a lot of other people, right? It's something as simple as, how do you start a fire? And I think the response, if you were to poll 100 people, all right, we're going to have a campfire, how are you going to do it? It involves, probably for a good chunk of those folks, a plastic Bic lighter.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Sure.
Right? Versus even steel, even a knife with flint or, magnesium, something like that, even to test yourself a little bit. And And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are there ways that people right now can say, yeah, I can get outdoors, and instead of just walking around the neighborhood or hitting the bike path around the lake, I can do something else that's a little bit different and challenge myself? And the
Yeah.
first thing I thought of was fire. See
Yep.
if you can build a campfire and keep it simple. Two ways outside of using matches or a lighter. Is that silly?
No, I don't think so at all. So I've taught wilderness survival for a long time, and related to wilderness survival, I think, are primitive living skills or bushcraft skills. Some of these terms really overlap, or the concepts. But um, a couple things I like about it. Well, first of all, they might help save your life or help you save someone else's life. So that's important. If you're going to be out in the outside, you need to know what to do if you get hurt or lost or the weather comes in or something like that. So that's important. But also what I've just realized is it's fun. It's really, really fun. And I think a lot of outdoors people are geared towards a couple directions. There's a natural tendency to want to do more, to have a bigger experience. And so if you're fishing, maybe that's getting that bigger fish. If you're a backpacker, it's going on a longer trail or a different trail further away. But what can we do now? And maybe some of those opportunities aren't open to us. And I've found those bushcraft skills and survival skills, things like you're talking about, fire making, it's a way of going deeper into the experience when you don't have the opportunity to go further away. And man, I mean, some of these skills, as I'm working on learning them, I know I'll never master all of them. There's so much there. And even something as simple as fire, a lot of people know, I know what to do. I take the chunks of wood and I pour some lighter fluid on it and let her rip with the Bic. And sure, that's one way of getting the fire going. Okay, one issue is you might not always have that lighter fluid or that Bic with you, but it's also just rewarding and it's fun to challenge yourself. And I think the firecraft, the understanding the different types of wood and what their properties are, the temperatures they burn at, is it smoky or not? Does it need to be split? Understanding how to get it lit. It's like an artist. It's like a baker putting the ingredients together and making it happen. So I love that. I've spent a ton of time. In fact, one of my hobbies, for a while, I kind of blew it off, is, like friction fire with the bow and drill. Mm-hmm. And I thought, that's kind of a novelty. I don't view that as a real survival skill. In my mind, people should learn pragmatic, sensible survival skills that really work in case they're injured, which is a primary cause of survival situations. Are you going to be able to do that if you have a bad gash or you broke your leg, something like that? Yep. But as I've, tried to challenge myself, because it's fun, I realize, wow, it's not about lighting a fire necessarily. It's just a super fun hobby. In fact, that's been one of my little resets most afternoons. I'll go out of my back patio and I'll dig around my box of dozens of spindles I have and bow and pick it out. And I start slowly drilling, and all of a sudden, the smoke starts coming up, and I smell that, and I go a bit faster, and I feel my body warming up and put more pressure down, and pretty soon smoke's roiling out of there. And I take the tinder bundle I've made out of dried grass or cattail fluff or inner cedar bark, and carefully put that smoking coal in there and blow it to life. And it is like a magical experience, creating that element of fire. And it for me, it's at the point now where it's not about lighting the fire. It's just really cool. It's like catching a trout
process
on a fly or something. Yeah. It's the process. Yeah. It's fun. So yeah, I fully encourage that. And I think for the practical reasons of, if you're an outdoors person, I think for safety and comfort and fun, like, you should be really proficient at being able to light a fire in any circumstance, rain, cold, deep snow, in the hardwood forest of the southeast, in the coniferous forest of the northeast, in the grasslands, understanding what the different materials are. So thinking about those, your tinder, your kindling, your fuel, and different methods of ignition, and going from lighter and matches, great first step. Everyone should know that. I advocate everyone always carry modern methods. So, a lighter and something like you're talking about, like a ferrocerium rod or waterproof matches. Yep. Big fan of carrying Vaseline-soaked cotton balls in a waterproof container. They're great if you get chapped lips or chapped knuckles, but it's a wonderful fire starter as well. So yeah, always carry that stuff. But if you have the time and the opportunity, challenge yourself. Think about those natural tinders, and maybe try magnesium, the ferrocerium rod, which is, scrapes off super hot metal and is a great tool to have with you, or flint and steel, like our pioneers and mountain men used, or going into the friction fire world of bow drill or hand drill.
It's funny for me, again, talking about the Ottawa River and my grandfather and my dad, they were at a very wide part of the river. So back in the day, they had a backpack frame that they'd put the outboard motor on. And they'd hike it to the boat, which was, for many years, a wooden, flat-bottomed boat. And Dad tells these stories about going out fishing with Grandpa, and the wind would do certain things, so they'd be stuck. Right? So their shelter was his oiled canvas rain slick that doubled as a small tarp, and he always carried strike anywhere matches in a special little kit in his tackle box. And the funny thing is, he always carried salt too, because Dad remembers one time they had to cook a smallie on a rock. And back then, what they do is they would light signal fires. So that wives back towards the cabin could figure out where they were. And but he had to cook a smallie on a rock, and he had to eat plain fish one night under that tarp, and Dad said he was just disgusted. So as part of his survival kit, he always had a small little tin of salt.
Makes sense.
So for me, I always keep salt. Just because.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. I've heard a lot of military, sergeants or survival instructors. You can get the little mini, tiny bottles of Tabasco sauce, and they'll carry those because they say, if you have that, you can put a little of that on. It'll help make almost anything edible.
Anything. For me, it was bouillon.
There you go.
Remember the little bouillon cubes?
Sure.
Right, when we were young in Scouts, that was the first thing you needed to have in your survival kit. 2 chicken bouillon.
Exactly. In your little Altoid tin survival kit you carried in your pocket.
So speaking of bouillon, on your site, there is something called the smoky pots. We just talked about how building fire by different means slows things down, and that's fun. That's part of the process. But I think the same can be said for cooking outdoors, right? And I'm not talking about on a Coleman grill or a Traeger smoker. I'm talking about cooking over fire. And your smoky pot section talks about recipes, favorite recipes, technique. What is the lure for you of cooking outside?
Well, first of all, I better admit up front, in case I have any friends listening, I'm not I'm not a big cook. I love to eat. I'm a good eater. And one of the things I carefully work in, 2 people I really try and recruit on a lot of my trips: medical professionals and people who are good cooks. And so I do a pretty good job of that. And so I'm good at pulling together. But no, I do like to cook. I have a few things that I cook well. And so sometimes if you're on a hard wilderness trip and the objective, I think it's really important to think about what is the objective of this trip. And that's a big part of having a successful experience. Are you out there to spend as much time on the water as possible, and the objective is catching fish? Okay, then maybe you don't want to mess around with all this stuff. Hey, maybe the propane Coleman stove fired up. You've got packages you brought from home with frozen food you're just heating up because it's just nourishment. You just want to eat and get to sleep and get back out in the water. I totally get that if that's the objective. Or, sometimes when I'm leading a canoe trip, I may have people that are much more, naturalist focused. They want to look at the birds and enjoy the nature and have kind of a quiet, serene experience. That's fine. I can have fun doing that, and I appreciate that. Then I've got, their old friends that, hey, what they want is they want to get a group of friends together and have kind of a good time and a little bit more of a party type atmosphere. Also fine. Those are both fine. Don't try and mix the 2 of those together, right? That's when it doesn't work. And so with the cooking, I love cooking on a fire. I think it's fun. It's challenging. I cook outside a lot more than I do inside. cooking on the campfire, whether you're boiling, broiling, frying, doing over a stick on the fire, something like that is a great challenge. The Dutch oven is wonderful for me because it's almost impossible to screw up a Dutch oven. It's incredibly forgiving. The big, deep, thick cast iron pan
Yeah.
spreads the heat so well and holds in the moisture. Reflector oven I really like, which is not known all that much in this area, but from my trips in the Northeast, they still hold that tradition alive. And you were talking about lumber camps, Bill. All the old lumber camps, you see these big, huge reflector ovens that the camp cooks would sit in front of the fires to bake biscuits and pies. And that's really a wonderful tool for campfire cooking because it's light. The ones that don't fold down can be a little bit bulky, but it's such a treat when you're out on the trail to, there's some nice prepackaged camping foods, but man, to be able to cook fresh hot biscuits, bake cookies at night, bake a pie, even things like, you could bake your fish in a pan in the reflector oven. There's a lot of neat techniques, and it just adds to the fun for sure.
So I think that's maybe a challenge for people who are listening, who want to test themselves. Bannock.
Yeah, absolutely. Cooking bannock. Yep, that's the basic, the old trapper bread of the North.
Very basic bread, essentially wrapped around a stick and to a black perfection more often than not by folks, right?
Yeah. So I think you brought up a couple of good points. Practice is key with a lot of this stuff. You want to practice in the backyard is great before you subject your trail mates to your blackened bannock. So practicing is good. And bannock I'm still trying to figure out what my ultimate recipe is. And one of the neat things is there's so many versions and variations, and whether you're making it as kind of a dry bread baked in a pan, kind of the classic where you see it's relatively dry dough, just that flour, salt, baking soda, worked with some water and put flat in a skillet, and the bottom's done, then they tip the skillet up and it's kind of a crusty big cracker, almost like a scone. If you put some sweet type sugar or fruit in there, that's one way. And then a lot of areas, the tradition is more of a fry bread where you get some hot oil going and you're dropping smaller dough balls in there, and it comes up kind of like a fry bread or a donut. That's also goes by the term bannock. And then sure, you don't even need a pot or a pan. You can wrap it on a stick. Make the twist bread. You and I think, are about the same era. We probably had that same Boy Scout handbook that showed the dough twisted on the peeled stick. That works. And you don't even need. One of the best ways I've had it is actually, they use the term ash cakes, and this is the mountain men used to do. Where you just make a small patty about the size of a silver dollar and make it fairly thin, and let the fire die down. Get some nice coals, and you just lay it right there on the coals, and you take a little sharpened stick and poke it in the middle and flip it over. And man, was that good. It takes on a little bit of a flavor from the ash it's really delicious. And boy, you put a little butter or jam on there, it's out of this world.
I think those are all very fun ideas. Scott Oeth is my guest today here on the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. Of course, this podcast doesn't just happen. We have great sponsors who let us get our stories out to you every week. So thanks to Rapala and Connecticut and Hewitt Docks and Star Bank. We appreciate everything you guys do to help get us on the air. Other challenges for people right now, or ways to get outside. What do you suggest to people?
Well, I think there's a lot you could do. Something as simple as a hike is great because it's sort of the ultimate in freedom. You just need to be able to walk in a nice place to do it. For people that live in the metro area, the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, there's some great regional parks, which actually have a pretty nice wild field when you get in there, and areas along the Mississippi River and the river bottoms. And you don't have to go too far out of the metro area to get to some really cool areas. I love tromping around Carlos Avery up north of the cities, and that's a big chunk of land. And it's not too far away, and you can really get lost there for an afternoon. So hiking is great. We have so many lakes and riverways. Rivers can be a little bit of a challenge depending on what's going on with, being able to shuttle from point A to point Z. Are you able to work your way upriver and float back down, or do you need to connect with other people to get a ride back up? But you can certainly get out on the lakes and and go for a paddle. That's fantastic. Some of the things I've been doing a lot of those. It's fun hearing you talk about camping in the backyard with your boys. We've been doing quite a bit of that. I've got a 4-year-old boy, and I'm trying to really work him into this. It's interesting, Bill. I've had a lot of big wilderness experiences. I love challenging myself. I like the extremes, hard trips, remote trips. But over the last couple of years, I've heard this term of micro adventures. And even before the pandemic had things kind of changed and locked down, as much as anything, my outdoor experiences have been close to home micro adventures, which have often been a weekend afternoon with my little boy, taking him out and modifying, whereas I would normally really try and hit it hard or get up early and get after game or whatever it might be. It's a modified experience. And I think that's where maybe some folks are now, are not able to do exactly what we're normally able to, but I'm trying to add in a bit of what feels familiar and routine. So I've been taking the boy out for a lot of paddles, a lot of hikes, and then I've also been trying to add in some new things to keep it interesting and exciting and challenging. And so I've been trying to stretch myself too on things like plant ID and knowledge, plants and trees. I've typically by nature I get excited about, and I've run towards like the human-based skills, like how to shoot, how to paddle, how to fish, how to navigate, those types of things. I'm trying to shift my focus more now on things like studying tracking. I just signed up for a cool online class, and that seems odd, like tracking. You think you'd have to be in the woods. Well, I can learn a lot about it online, sitting in front of my computer, and then try and apply that in my little local neighborhood park and looking at some of the elements of more in-depth tracking. In fact, there's a whole program out of South Africa called the Cyber Tracker certification. So I don't know if I'm going to go through with that the whole way, but it's pretty interesting, the knowledge sharing that's out there. And like I said, I've been really trying to myself work on things like tree and plant ID and learn more, not just recognizing and identifying the species, but really understanding the different uses. We've got a little cattail marsh out our back door, and think about something like a cattail. What parts of it are edible during different parts of the season, how the fluff can make great tinder for a fire. You can insulate your clothes. You can weave cordage out of the husk. There's really a million uses. It's amazing. Things like birch and cattail and some of these materials.
So if people want to find out more about you and the Bull Moose Patrol, where do they go? Where do they look?
Yeah, we have a website, bullmoosepatrol.com, and we have quite a bit of information up there about past trip reports in the region, some of our faraway trips, a fair amount of skill and how-to stuff is up on the blog. So that's home base, bullmoosepatrol.com. Probably most active on Facebook. We have a Bull Moose Patrol page on Facebook. And something we're going to be doing a little bit different going forward is a lot of the trips that we've run, I have a group of about 150 people that have done different classes and trips with me. And normally when I'm putting something together, I email out to them and say, who's interested? Things fill up pretty quickly. But excited now have a good partnership with Anoka County Parks and Wargo Nature Center and the different properties, which there's quite a few in this end. We're going to be running regular courses in things like a camp school, wilderness survival, canoe camping, backpacking. And so we'll be posting those broad base. We'll be able to open up to a lot more people. But bullmoosepatrol.com will be the headquarters for that.
I think right now things are primed for you. People all over the place are slowing back down. This virus stuff has really made people look at the world, and they are changing the way they live. I'm convinced by it. And I think being outdoors and slowing down and learning some basic skills is going to be a lot of therapy for a lot of people. I really do.
Completely agree. I think we saw a boost in this, as well as just sort of an interest in handmade craft type stuff after 2008, after the Great Recession. Really saw a surge in interest in this type of activity. And I think you're exactly right with what's going on now. And I think with Minnesota Bound, I expect there's going to be a big renewed interest in hunting and fishing going forward as well.
Well, I look forward to seeing you on our show. We've got a couple of things in the works. We just need to get to a point where we can get cameras outside and get a couple stories shot with you. And,
that sounds great.
Scott, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
Sure do appreciate the time. Have fun with the 4-year-old. Um, these are exciting times in that regard. It's fun to show the next generation what we're passionate about. So this is the Minnesota Bound podcast. Again, thanks to our wonderful sponsors who help us bring you guests each week, like Scott, our friends at Rapala, Connecticut Water, Starbank, Ice Castles, and Hewitt Docks. Challenge yourself. Get out for a hike, someplace you might not normally go. Try to start a fire with maybe something other than the lighter or your favorite matches, and something simple. Just try to cook a simple biscuit, Bizquick type Bannock recipe over fire. And if you do it, do me a favor, send me a photo or two. We'll share it with the masses. Until next week, thanks for listening. Be sure to get a kid into the great outdoors.